Hey everybody, Stephan Kesting from grapplers.com. Today I am interviewing my friend, Zen master, urban combatives expert, Maharishi, cult leader, and most importantly jiu-jitsu black belt, Rob Biernacki. So, welcome to Grapplers.
Thank you very much, Stephan.
And only a few of those things were true. But, maybe by the end of the discussion, you guys will be able to figure out what it is. But I guess it ties in with the whole discussion of jiu-jitsu guys being all jiu-jitsu guys. Anybody who does this sport is a little bit weird, right? Like I don't think it attracts a normal cross section of people.
Definitely not. I think that to have the sort of demeanor and state of mind that allows you to willingly roll around on the floor with sweaty men.
Wearing pajamas,
and sometimes wearing Spandex, exactly. Something that resembles a ballet outfit more than anything else. Definitely doesn't lead to a profile of the population that we would call normal.
Well, and then, I mean, of course, so you've got all of us relatively normal jiu-jitsu people, because
we think of ourselves as normal, but
then you've got some crazy ass outliers out there too. I mean, we were just also talking about the Paul Harris Shields fight.
Yeah,
Paul Harris is not normal. He's fantastic to watch. I don't leave the room when he's fighting.
Well, he's a savant, I think, is the term. He has a particular ability with jiu-jitsu that is probably unrivaled.
The old term would have been idiot savant?
Idiot savant, yes, because he's also an idiot. It's a good way of putting it.
Autistic savant is the new...
the polite way of
what do you mean? What do you mean by that? What do you mean that he's a savant?
In that he has an ability that far excels any other field or endeavor that he's able to create excellence in. I think that he is uniquely suited to be good at twisting human limbs. Okay. And that's it. I think that if you...
And a couple of months ago I would have said leg locks in particular.
But I think it's a general, he's obviously a physical freak. Whether that is a genetic condition or a pharmaceutical condition, I'll leave up to the athletic commission and their blood test brigade. But
or the internet forums.
Exactly. We'll use the eye test and swear up and down that they're correct no matter what. But yeah, I think there are people in society, and I think I can, hopefully with a little bit of self-reflection, categorize myself as a little bit this, where I've focused so narrowly on creating a skill set and a knowledge base that although I do have a fair bit of knowledge in different subjects, all of them I've pursued to suit my ability to teach or understand jiu-jitsu better, to the point where there are likely social graces that I'm probably missing. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say probably, definitely missing. I know I've, for instance, in the town that I have a school, I've walked up to people and straight up asked them, like, why aren't you training at my club? When these are people who claim to be really into jiu-jitsu, and yet they're training with somebody who is, and I mean, if I say they're objectively unqualified, I'm going to sound like a jerk, but I mean, anybody who's followed jiu-jitsu and understands the jiu-jitsu rank system and how this stuff is done would recognize that someone who has 2 or 3 years of training is not particularly qualified to be teaching a lot of people jiu-jitsu unless they're in an area where there is no jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. So there's my lack of social graces, where I will straight up say to someone, hey, you like jiu-jitsu, right? Why are you training at that crappy club when you could be training at a good club?
Things you're not supposed to say.
You're not supposed to say, but I don't ever do it out of malice or disrespect. I do it out of a fondness for jiu-jitsu practitioners and wanting to help people who obviously love something do it in a way that is going to enable them to get better at it much quicker.
So what percentage of the really good guys in jiu-jitsu, we're talking like the world champions, would come out as something like Asperger's? Like clearly they're not, like, or just that mono focus, like.
Well, I would say the Meow Brothers are a pretty good example of.
Yeah, there was that interview where it's like, well, what else do you do besides jiu-jitsu? Do you have any hobbies?
I mean, I don't think I'd be ruffling any feathers to say that they come off, at the very least, as pretty autistic, pretty far on the autism scale, on the autism spectrum,
and have achieved some amazing abilities.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that anybody who achieves a level of greatness, and I mean like world-class level greatness, is going to have a little bit of a screw loose. I mean, I don't think that's even a jiu-jitsu thing. I think that's a sports thing.
Steve Jobs wasn't a balanced individual.
No, I mean, the stories you hear about Michael Jordan, the stories you hear about Kobe Bryant, where he's he's the guy who shows up at 4 a.m. to shoot baskets. That is a level of dedication I think most people can't even begin to fathom, myself included. And I think that I've dedicated myself quite extensively to my craft, but I don't think I have the capacity, or ever did have the capacity, to achieve that level of athletic prowess. And I mean, if I thought I did, I probably would have tried. But let alone the genetic kind of lottery component where your body can sustain that kind of dedication.
If motivation is the engine, there are a lot of big engines out there
Yeah.
on shitty chassis that just fall apart when they hit the road. And some of that's genetics.
Yeah.
A lot of that's luck. I mean, out there somewhere is some guy who was 10 times better than Marcelo Garcia and was killing everybody, and in the first 6 months of training was better than, you know, most people are after 5 years, and was on his track to becoming world champion, and then one day didn't tap and destroyed
his knee or
his shoulder or his back. You know, there's surgeries for other things that kind of work, but and we never hear from that guy. That guy is now running a car wash somewhere.
Well,
so it's a survivor bias.
I was going to bring up that exact term. It's a survivor bias. I'm guessing you've read Nicholas Nassim Taleb's book, The Black Swan, and Fooled by Randomness. Those make that point exactly. Is that, you know, you pick up a book by a winner, and he tells you what he did to win, when he's not very likely to recognize that part of what he did to win was be born to two parents that gave him steel cables for tendons, or that he was fortunate enough to, you know, attend an academy where he got this kind of instruction and
I was lucky enough not to get injured.
Not to get injured.
Or in a major way.
Exactly, and those are things, you know, there are for every one guy who is a billionaire and did steps A, B, C, and D to become a billionaire, there's 100 guys who took steps A, B, C, and D, and they maybe didn't go bankrupt, but they're worth, you know, $500,000, and they're relatively successful, but they're doing the exact same damn things that the billionaire is. And it's, again, I'm not saying it's all luck by any stretch, just like you could never claim for any athlete that it's you know, anything other than an excessive amount of hard work that gets them where they are.
You need an excessive amount of hard work.
Yeah.
But then
there's those other factors, those intangibles that I don't think we give enough.
I mean, there's a whole random element in it, which is explored in those books.
Yeah.
You know, the idea being that if you start out with 1,000 stockbrokers, half of them are going to lose money, half of them are going to gain money. So the half of them that lose money get kicked out of the market.
Yeah.
Then I get 500. You know, half of them are going to gain money. After 10 years, you're going to have some guy who's won 10 years in a row.
Yeah.
And if you have the right number of stockbrokers doing this year after year, it's inevitable that you end up with Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Warren Buffett isn't smart. I don't know enough about that.
But it's the law of large numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the complementary view. Have you read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers?
Outliers, yes, absolutely.
Where he talks a lot about the, you know, for example, it's the hockey example, and being a Canadian, I should know this inside out, but I don't.
Yeah, if you're born in January or February, you get the benefits that come from being a little bit larger.
The cutoff is in February, so any kid born in March is screwed because they're going to be, you know, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months smaller than the kids at the end of the cohort, and they're going to get a little bit less attention in the Pee-wee leagues or whatever it is. Like I said, I'm Canadian. Out and about. There, I said it. Out and about. Actually, I heard there was like an audition process in Hollywood where they came up for people, and part of the script they had to read was out and about. And then basically the U.S. immigration people were there, and anyone who said it properly,
back
you're here without a proper permit. So yeah, like I wonder what in jiu-jitsu the outlier thing is. I guess if you start training at a crappy ass club, that's a random thing. You don't know any better. You don't know that Joe's Shaolin Temple Kung Fu, and oh yes, we also do grappling.
Yeah.
Yes, we do this BJJJ stuff.
Yeah.
And several of we also train UFC.
Yeah. Or I was a former Navy SEAL instructor, which is the trap that I fell into earlier.
Oh really?
Yeah.
You trained with a former Navy SEAL instructor?
Not actually.
Just
someone who claimed to be. That was part of my early journey, and I think again one of the reasons I'm such an evangelist for quality instruction to people is.
Jump back up.
Okay. I think anybody who's grown up in Vancouver has probably dealt with this individual who's told tall tales about living with the Gracies and being a Navy SEAL and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And
Okay. I didn't realize that we were talking about the same nut job.
making certain proclamations that turn out to be not particularly true. That as somebody who was fortunate enough to go
Sexually healing teenagers in a hot tub.
for instance, I never heard that one. I
No,
think I would have had the wisdom to run screaming had I. But yeah, then returning after leaving Vancouver and training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and tapping out the invincible master, or sorry, not even tapping out, getting kicked in the head for not envisioning that a tap was about to occur. And things like that.
So you guys were wrestling and
yeah, I got an arm bar and then I got kicked in the face. And
well, you still have the armbar?
yeah,
Okay.
and so I immediately let go, and then there was I tapped, and then there's well, you happen to be videotaping the training session. I can see that you did. Well, you should have known I was going to. So
Yes,
yeah,
Rob, let that be a lesson to you.
let that be a lesson to me. If you're not psychic, you probably shouldn't be grappling.
Psychotic?
Depending on. Yeah, no. So I mean, I think we all have had those sort of early experiences in the martial. I think anybody who does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that comes from a traditional martial arts background has had an experience that led them to realize, wait a second, this isn't real. I'm LARPing. I use the term LARPing generally to describe traditional martial arts. For if you don't know what LARPing is, or if anybody in your audience doesn't know what LARPing is, it stands for live action role playing. And these are the guys that dress up in medieval garb and take foam swords into the woods and reenact battles from Game of Thrones or what have you. And I'm
Although
sure
some of the SCA guys are actually whacking each other with heavy wood, which you gotta respect.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think the majority of traditional martial arts are engaged in LARPing.
I had the worst experience last week.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, like all kids, I wanted to be a ninja. The very first book I bought was Ninja Clan of Death. I was like, talked my mom into buying this for me, 8 years old. So of course, I grew up in the ninja era. So, Stephen K. Hayes, oh my God.
Yeah,
And then Hatsumi, his teacher.
yeah.
These were like gods. And I pretty much I remember hiding in an alley outside a karate school because Stephen K. Hayes was teaching that night, and I didn't have the money. Like it was like $100 for a 3-hour seminar.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm like 12 years old. I don't have $100. But I can hide it. I wasn't trying to be a ninja. I was just trying to like spy through this door. And every once in a while they'd open the door to get some ventilation. And this like 12-year-old kid goes sprinting down the alley because he's pretty sure that the ninjas were going to come out and kill him. Anyhow, so I'm on YouTube the other night and I'm watching some Stephen K. Hayes videos and I'm watching some Hatsumi videos. And it's like, oh my God, like this is, you punch me. No, not even like with one of these lunging punches with the lead hand.
Yeah.
It's like, and then, or like swords, like we're gonna do side roll against a sword strike.
Yeah.
Right. But no, you stop here,
Yeah.
and I pause and I like jump to the side. It's like, it would maybe work against a samurai who had like physical disabilities, and it was the first time he'd ever picked up a sword, and like if he had followed through, he would cut my leg like. And it was just such a, like, when I watched that last week, I didn't still believe in all this, but it was like, oh my God, I would have given the crown jewels, had I had them in my possession,
Yeah.
25, 30 years ago when this was my life's ambition to be a ninja,
Yeah.
I would have given the crown jewels for this. And it's like, it's just such a nice reality dose. And let's pick something like seated guard, butterfly guard.
Yeah.
You can make an argument that it isn't very combative because you're sitting up like this and somebody could punt you in the face. But I guarantee you that somebody who spent 10 years training and competing like this would be way more effective in a street fight than somebody who spent 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, with a knuckle strike to the wrist.
Well,
And
the whole sort of combatives argument, I think you and I have a similar view of sort of the laughable nature of a lot of combative training, which is to say, I think those of us who've gravitated towards, whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or any other aspect of mixed martial arts, where we have a combat sport or a combat art that is pressure tested, that is constantly pressure tested, that's just a completely different way of approaching life than, yeah, all that stuff you guys do is great, but if I take my thumb and jam it in your eye, which takes us back to shields and palharas,
Yes,
then everything you do is now is null and void. But here's the thing. So I actually have seen people, some of them facetiously saying, "Well, see, look, eye gouge," because in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, we laugh at eye gougers, and there are people who are turning up and saying, "Well, but look, this proves that it works." Well, does it really? Because they were in a contest where if Jake Shields had buried his thumb, 2 knuckles deep in Palhara's eye, he would have been immediately disqualified, and he could have well and truly done so. And for every guy who pops onto a YouTube comment section and says, "Well, yeah, I would just do that. I would kick you in the balls. I would thumb you in the eye." Like, well, I can do those things too, and I know jiu-jitsu.
And you're on.
And I'm
on top.
And I'm going to be on top, or I'm going to be able to dominate you positionally in a way where if you do something to aggravate me, instead of just politely cross-choking you, I'm going to break your arm, then I'm going to heel hook you, then I'm going to stick my thumb in your eye. Like, it's just such a ridiculous argument, and it does come from, I think, the same place that all these traditional martial arts tend to come from, which is the idea that, and I shouldn't say the place that all these traditional martial arts tend to come from, because that's a little bit dismissive, but I think they attract the sort of people that don't want to do anything real. They want to tell people, they want to post on Facebook that they're learning how to fight. They want to talk about their martial arts training, but they are not willing to do the work that it takes.
But jiu-jitsu can't be for everybody. So then if it's, let's just assume it's for, I don't know, pick a percentage. 20% of the population. Maybe that's a big number, but whatever. X percentage of the population. What should the other percentage do for self-defense? If they're still interested in self-defense, should they then, is Krav Maga better than nothing?
Well, depending on the school, Krav Maga, again, unfortunately, as with anything, and it is really unfortunately happening with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as anything becomes more popular, the standards drop because you are trying to make it appeal to more and more people. So, whereas Krav Maga probably at the beginning was possibly akin to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the dropout rate, and if you're going to go and do Israeli commando training, not too many people are willing to put up with that. But if you water it down to kicking a guy who's holding a shield in the pretend nuts, 80% of the population can do that. So I think depending on the school you go to, you're either going to get very good training or incredibly poor training in Krav Maga. And then what is the difference? I think I had a conversation with, I've offered free women's self-defense workshops at my club. And these aren't the Lloyd Irvin style free women's self-defense workshops where they're just trying to SEO their way out of the whole rape scandal. This is I just offer free self-defense workshops, and the workshops basically say, hey, if you think you're gonna go take a self-defense course once a week, you're someone's lying to you. You don't take the model mugging course where the guy in the padded suit runs up to you and you scream no and poke him in the eye and then lay down beside him and kick him in the head, because that's ridiculous. You just might as well just carry $600 around with you and give them to a mugger instead to leave you alone.
See, I still think that's a little bit better than nothing. Maybe not for the technique, but maybe the illusion of having self-confidence. I took a model mugging course. I'm invincible. I'm also delusional.
You're talking about the placebo effect.
Well, not necessarily. If you're walking down the street with increased confidence, you're probably going to get attacked less often or targeted as a victim than if you don't have that. That confidence could be based on complete fantasy.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that.
So I'm saying it's better than nothing, but...
Better than nothing, but anything that gives you a bit of confidence, whether it's false confidence, or so you could play soccer and carry yourself like an athlete, and that's going to reduce the odds.
You have a really good night at the casino.
You don't have to go to some guy who's going to teach you a load of crap to generate the kind of confidence that's going to prevent you from getting mugged. Or reduce your odds of getting mugged. But yeah, I think the original point was more the percentage of the population. Yeah, I was talking about the women's self-defense workshop, and one of the women that came to it said, I really want to, I'd like you to offer a women's self-defense class. And I'm like, well, we kind of do. It's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And she's like, yeah, no, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to roll around on the floor with guys. If you could just come around and
I want to learn to defend myself against guys.
Women. No, I want to learn. If you could just do a class with just women in it, and we'll just work on these techniques on each other. And I was like, oh, okay, I understand. You want to learn how to defend yourself, but you're not actually willing to put in the work. And she got all offended, and this is again my lack of social aptitude and play here, because I just was like, well, look, I think you really, and I've actually explained this to people, I think you really need to investigate what you mean by the word want. Because want in English has, you know, kind of two potential meanings. You can use want as a statement of intended action. So like, I want to mow the lawn today. You're usually not describing that as a fantasy. That's a statement of intended action. But if you say, I want to be rich, that's a statement of desire rather than intended action. And I think many people confuse the two, and so they'll say, you know, I want this, or I want to do that. And what they really mean is, I would like that if it was provided for me and I didn't have to do anything about it. They're not saying, I want to do that, therefore I'm going to do this, this, and this to make it happen. And I think people who have a breakthrough with that word, with, you know, when you say want, what do you really mean? Are, you know, the kind of people who are going to find themselves a way to be wealthy, or find themselves a way to be good at something, or find themselves a way to learn how to protect themselves. Because if you want to, you can do it. You do have to roll around on the floor with sweaty guys, because those are the people that are going to be assaulting you. And if you're only
you got to desensitize yourself.
You do. Absolutely.
The number one thing of jiu-jitsu for self-defense isn't anything to do with the technique. The number one thing is to desensitize. We're having a conversation at this range.
Yeah.
This is a normal conversational range.
Yeah.
If I was sitting here,
yeah,
because you're a jiu-jitsu guy,
this is not a big deal.
But for normal human beings, you go sit somebody that close.
Yeah.
Is like
for normal human beings who don't live in Asia, because the personal bubble in Asia is a lot smaller.
Sure. And the Tokyo subway.
Yeah.
People don't have to go through the Tokyo subway.
Yeah. A place where Lloyd Irvin would thrive.
We should have like a number sign up. Ding ding.
Stephan told me that if I could make 10 Lloyd Irvin rape references, I get a toaster. So,
you've totally thrown me. Right, the number one benefit of jiu-jitsu for self-defense is desensitization of that range, so that your brain, I think, so that your brain can keep on working. I mean, you've had that experience, sure, where some big bodybuilder comes in, and you're rolling with them and you pin them.
Yeah.
And then you can just hear them like completely lose it.
Yeah.
And like, they try their giant bench press.
Yeah.
And 30 seconds later, they are done.
Yeah.
And you could do any like take the stupidest technique you've ever seen on YouTube, and you could do it to this guy because he's completely done.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that person. You want to, during an assault situation, you want to keep on thinking, should I be screaming or not screaming? Should I be trying to run or not run? Should I be trying to get that stick? Should I pull my knife or not pull that knife?
Yeah.
And should I submit or not submit? Like, these are...
Well, that is what we love about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think, is, both you and I, is the idea that we can put ourselves into a position of stress where our mind and our body is going to be tested repeatedly.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's desensitization. You grow accustomed to a feeling of discomfort. You grow accustomed to a feeling of failure and frustration. And if you're able to work through that, you reap the benefits, not just in your practice of jiu-jitsu, but in the sort of greater aspects of your life.
Yeah, I think the self-imposed adversity, I mean, historically, many cultures have done this. Oh, you're coming of age in a tribe in eastern Kenya. All right, we're going to, you're going to lie down, and we're going to circumcise you without anesthetic, and if you wince, we're going to put a layer of clay across your face.
Yeah.
If you wince and that clay breaks, you're basically ostracized for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So
what you're suggesting is that I ostracize anybody that doesn't do jiu-jitsu for the rest of my life. I agree. Done.
All right. That tribe also, maybe not entirely coincidentally, or that region of Kenya, is where those incredible runners come from. So I think there was a Radiolab episode that talked about this. I think it was Radiolab, I'll have to check. But basically arguing, yes, they're genetics. Yes, they've got good build for running.
Yeah.
But there are lots of people in that part of Africa that have got the same kind of build.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they walk barefoot to school. Lots of people walk barefoot to school.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Well, if you're running 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 42, whatever the marathon thing is, 42 point something kilometers,
I think so.
You're going to suffer. There's going to be pain. And if you're used to dealing with pain, I'm like, I've got my circumcision, my adult circumcision ritual looking forward to. Let me learn to deal with pain now early.
Yeah.
It toughens you. Now, I'd rather not go through that ritual, but I am willing to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
a pale shade of that ritual, though it is.
Absolutely, and you know, I've actually heard an analysis of these sort of extreme races, these Tough Mudder type events, where they've replaced what used to be a function performed by going to war in our society. Is people went through a stage of their early life where they were forced to suffer extreme hardship, and we just don't have anything like that in our society anymore, and people actually crave it. And they'll find a way, like, you know, back in the day, you'd say, oh, man, when we took that hill back in Nam, now it's like, man, when I ran up that hill up in Whistler, which is not quite as great a story, but, you know, don't tell that to anybody who posts about it constantly on Facebook. But, yeah, I think people do actually, on some level, recognize that if you've never really worked for anything in your life, if you've never had to suffer frustration or defeat, then I mean, you could make the argument that you're incomplete as a person. And the fact that we live in a modern safe society will hide that very well. But I think deep down inside we know it.
Mm-hmm. So what are some other examples of people imposing those? Not everybody does. A lot of people are happy to play video games. Yeah, man, you should have seen that first-person shooter game. I did like 12 hours in a row and it was brutal. Ignoring that.
Yeah.
I think there has to be it has to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be difficult, and there has to be a chance of failure, injury, or maybe a perceived threat of death. Like, you're not actually going to die in the Tough Mudder, but you might think that you're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think you're going to die doing the Tough Mudder...
your body might think it's going to die.
I mean, I haven't done it because, frankly, I'm a little dismissive about those kinds of endurance things, because I just think that, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen that TV show How I Met Your Mother, but there's a character on there, and he basically runs a marathon by saying, well, I don't think it's that hard. I just start running and then I don't stop. And he does it, and then he ends up on the subway and his legs seize up and he's stuck there forever. And I kind of like I kind of have that attitude, like, oh, it's 20 miles. Well, I can do that. I mean, it would suck, but I know for a fact that I could do it. Whereas with jiu-jitsu, it's like, I don't know for a fact that if I enter a tournament that I'm going to win. I don't know for the fact that if I roll with my ridiculously strong purple belt student who's like choked black belts in competition, I don't know that he's not going to armbar me in front of all of my students, and I'm not going to feel like, damn, you know, like
a Ghee burning moment.
Exactly. So
I quit.
Yeah, you don't know those things, and I think that's, I mean, you know, any human being who's not disabled or prone to, you know, exercise-induced cardiac arrest can complete a Tough Mudder. I mean, I wouldn't even characterize it as tough. I mean, like, realistically. So I think those things are different. I think those are actually, and again, people craving something like a sense of achievement without, you know, and wanting to be able to tell a story about enduring hardship, but it's not the same as, like you said, the possibility of failure. The possibility of failure, and not just the possibility, the guarantee, the inevitability of failure that comes with jiu-jitsu is, no matter how good you get, you're going to go out there.
Marcelo Garcia has been tapped out in class.
Exactly.
By, you know, and on video for the world.
And on video for the world to see, and I think that is an important part of what makes what we do kind of special and kind of unique, is that, not that, I mean, I think it's oversold that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu destroys the ego. I don't think that's necessarily true. I actually have
there seem to be a lot of people with very healthy egos. Very
healthy egos, yeah, because, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I think that this, I mean, first of all, let's look at the term ego if we can dive into a little bit of history. I mean, these are Freudian concepts that have been roundly debunked in academia, like in science. Like the idea of the id, ego, and superego as being valid concepts for describing the human mind, I think passed 50, 60 years ago. Yeah. So for us to use a precept that is not scientifically valid to espouse how great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is for us, I don't think is particularly good.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is fantastic because it balances the humors.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, jeez.
And when combined with leeching
and trepanning, a long life of health is ahead of you. No, I think what it does is it affords you the opportunity to, like, you know, the idea of leaving your ego at the door, I think, is silly. We all have ego. I think, or, you know, I wouldn't even refer to it, but let's just use the term ego. I don't think that ego is inherently bad. I think that what you choose to focus your ego on is what determines the results you're going to get. So somebody like, whether it's Marcelo Garcia or any other world champion, who I'm quite sure what they focus their ego on in one way or another is, I want to get as good at this as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very different than
I will never tap out.
I will never tap out. That's very different than I am as good as it gets, or
okay.
I'm invincible now, or I'm never going to be invincible. It's just I am who I am.
That's Shaolin grandmasters and ninjas and nobody else.
Exactly, but I think that is what the martial arts has sold. The idea of an invincible master is an idea with such powerful appeal that it causes people to fall down at the suggestion of chi being shot at them by somebody. So it is an idea that obviously has powerful appeal. And I think if you invest your ego in something productive, then you're going to have great results. So the kind of, the sort of training partner douchebag that we've all experienced at some point, which is the guy who doesn't want to tap. The guy who, the white belt seminar teacher. All of these guys, they're investing their ego in the wrong thing. The person who wants to be
let's just go easy.
Let's just go easy. Ah! Yeah, that guy. All those guys are investing their ego in the wrong thing. But if you and as an instructor, if you invest your ego in being infallible or a source of ultimate knowledge, then I think you're bound to become a pretty shitty instructor. You're bound to become the sort of person that either makes stuff up on the spot or doesn't accept or encourage questions, and then the culture of your academy becomes one of just whatever he says, just agree, don't argue, and
I think that's one of the huge tells of a completely screwed up school. If there's a culture of no questions.
Well, early on when I opened my academy, I had a few students from another school transfer. All the top guys from one school transferred over to my school, and I was teaching something, and one of the students put up their hand and said, "I don't mean to question you, but," and right away I was like, whoa, okay, let's stop the class right now. This is something that we need to, because this was like a week into my school existing, I think. It was like, we need to settle this right here. Don't anybody ever have that idea of, I don't mean to question you, because that is, like I said, that is the death knell of a legitimate place.
Either it's true, and you're afraid to, you don't actually want to, or you're lying.
Or you're lying. Yeah. And either way,
neither of them are good.
I always tell, the only things that I teach in my academy are things that I know very well, I've studied extensively, that I use myself, or that black belt world champions use themselves. Mm-hmm. I kind of have a filter and a formula for what is good jiu-jitsu, and I'm only comfortable teaching what I'm good at and understand relatively deeply. And if I can't explain to you exactly why we're doing it, why we're not doing it a different way, what person used this to achieve what ends, then I shouldn't be teaching that technique. And not only should I not be teaching, if you don't feel comfortable asking questions, you shouldn't be paying me to teach you. Yeah. If you think that I'm the kind of guy whose ego is going to suffer from you asking me why we're doing this or doing that, then I don't belong as an instructor.
Years ago, I came from a very traditional Kung Fu background, do not question the head instructor. Mm-hmm. He can't spar with any of the students, he would kill them.
Yeah.
He wouldn't mean to, but he would automatically...
He wouldn't mean to.
But he would just automatically kill them. And I started training with Makoto Kabayama, who was I met him at a martial arts store, and the guy goes, "Oh, you're interested in Bruce Lee and JKD? That guy's a JKD instructor." So I go up to him, I introduce myself, and he's a little, Asian dude. I go, "Hi, my name's Stephan." He goes, "Oh, my name's Nip." I'm like, "Pardon me?" He goes, "Hi, I'm Nip." I'm like, "How do you spell that?" He's like, N-I-P. It's like, okay. Now, his real name was Makoto Kabayama, that was his nickname. And in one of the first classes, he's like, "Look, ask me anything you want.
Yeah.
If I know the answer, I'll tell you. If I don't know the answer, we'll figure it out."
Yeah.
And that was like, holy shit. Like somebody, a martial arts teacher admitting that he might not know what the answer is.
Yeah.
This coming from a traditional Kung Fu background was like, of course I knew those guys didn't know the answer to everything.
Yeah.
But they would never admit that. And you could never ask, you could never bring that up. It's like, the emperor had no clothes and you were invested in, if you didn't want to be kicked out of the school or ostracized and never shown anything ever, shown the next 3 moves in the Tiger Crane sequence or whatever, then you wouldn't ask that question. So it just, then that kind of sent me down the whole JKD path, where there is a much more casual approach. You met Dan Inosanto at the time, everyone called him Dan.
Yeah.
That's a first name basis. Mm-hmm. And it's changing in jiu-jitsu. I actually don't like the whole professor. People come up to me and call me professor. I'm like, my name's Stephan. They call me, sir. I'm like, that's my dad's.
Yeah, I mean it's a title, and
I realize they're trying to be. This is just a personal preference.
No, I agree with it because I have the same thing with my students. What do I call you? Well, whichever version of Robert makes you happy.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. I don't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So, my name's Stephan. Please call me that. But I think once you start layering, like you see professor more and more and more, and I kind of understand where it's coming from.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it also sets up this whole cultish mentality.
Couldn't agree more.
We've got a special name for you now.
Yeah.
And, it's just one step further along the next thing is, you're, I don't know, you're going to give me your credit card, I'm going to charge you an amount of money, I'm not even going to tell you what the dues are. Yeah. Eventually we're like firstborn children, firstborn children has to be handed over.
Well, there is an element of this in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that does exist, is the sort of cultish element, which I think will inevitably arise in any group where human beings are tribal to some degree or another, and you're going to invest in your tribe. And I think that the more responsible school owners or teachers do a good job of dissuading that and making sure to kind of undercut that. But a lot of them don't. And frankly, the ones that
benefit from it.
Well, the ones that are less legitimate tend to encourage it far more. They're discouraging people from training at other places, or that sort of thing is a very common thing amongst.
Thou shalt not watch YouTube.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Yeah. So I think, and I agree with you about the title thing. I think that power is, with great power comes great resposibility. If you give
the philosopher Peter Parker.
Yeah, but
no, that was his aunt.
That was his uncle, I think.
Uncle,
yeah, depending on which version you
which
reboot you watched. Yeah, but we're two guys in pajamas with like colored sashes around our waist. We shouldn't have great power. No, we really. I had this conversation with a couple students recently after class where I was like, all I'm qualified to tell you about in life really is how to better strangle people. I can give you some advice about achieving goals.
Yeah.
I can give you some advice about dedication to a craft. I can give you some advice about
not really bad physiotherapy advice.
Yeah, I can give you some.
Look good.
Well, and I can give you some really good advice about creating a life for yourself outside, off the beaten path.
Sure.
That I don't have a 9-to-5 job. I've never really had a 9-to-5 job. I'm extremely fortunate in that, and I've been able to live a life that is just extremely. I hesitate to use the term blessed, but it is kind of blessed, and that's been through the generosity of my family and my friends, and just meeting the right people, and also sacrifice. Because I wouldn't even call them sacrifices, but just giving up certain things. There are certain things that I've never pursued in life because I've thought that living a life that's dedicated to a craft has a greater reward than living a life that's pursuing keeping up with the Joneses and that sort of thing. So I can give people advice on that.
Man who walks through all open doors.
Yeah.
Walks into the.
But really, why would you come to me for advice on anything else? I can teach you how to not have a 9-to-5 job. I can tell you how to potentially not have a 9-to-5 job and still make a living. I can tell you about how to get fit and get good at jiu-jitsu. I can tell you what really good ways are to strangle people. Why would you come to me? Why would you invest me with any other power than that? Mm-hmm. And certainly, why would you invest me with the power to tell you where you can spend any of your time outside of the school? That's ridiculous. Mm. And is the source of this kind of cult thing. Yeah. Is people being granted power. Authority is another word. We've talked about the word want having two meanings. Authority can also be a word that has two meanings. Somebody is in a position of authority. For instance, a police officer is somebody who's been given authority by fiat, by decree. And then you have somebody who is an authority on something. Yeah. I'm an authority on strangling people. Mm-hmm. I am not somebody who has authority over you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very important distinction for people to also make. I have a certain amount of expertise in a field, and that's really all you're coming to me for. And taking it anywhere beyond that, you might get lucky. You might get an instructor who really is, a wonderful Zen master, and who can give you important life lessons on everything from how to get the best mortgage rate to how to recover from a breakup to what position to use to impregnate your wife, what have you. But for the most part, it's just blind luck.
Yeah.
You're talking to a guy who's very good at, or who's hopefully very good at a particular skill. And that's another thing. As a beginner, you won't even know. As a beginner, if you walk into Joe's Brazilian JiuJitsu Academy, and there's a blue or a purple belt teaching there, a blue or a purple belt, even a shitty blue or a purple belt, is basically Thor to the average untrained person. So you can't even tell if that guy's any good or not. Now, after you've trained there for a year and all of a sudden you're competitive with them, then you might realize what's up. But by that point, you've been training there for a year, you're friends with everybody, you're invested, and so the circumstances are ripe within any sort of group endeavor, any that has any bonding element to it for cultish elements, and either the guys at the top have to really watch out for it, or you as a consumer have to really be self-aware.
I was about to say this is unique to the martial arts because people don't go to Donald Trump and ask him for relationship advice. But then again, Dr. Phil did have the best-selling diet book in North America for a while, so I give up.
Yeah. I guess the bottom line is that there's a segment of the population that is looking very, very deeply for answers and for abdication of responsibility. Mm-hmm. And they will find it, whether they find it in church or whether they find it at their martial arts club or they find it at the local bar. There is a segment of the population that's going to always look out for that.
Because now it's not on them.
Exactly.
Now, their success or failure,
yeah,
especially their failure.
Yeah.
We're getting totally off topic, but it's my podcast.
We were supposed to talk about jiu-jitsu.
Oh,
right?
and we will.
Yeah.
We will. Have you followed this dad bod meme that's going on?
I've heard about it.
It's like why girls prefer guys with dad bod. Like,
yeah.
He works out once in a while, but he drinks beer and pizza, and he's got a bit of a gut on him.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it doesn't put as much pressure on us, and what was the other reported reason?
Pressure is a leitmotif of my life, but.
I want to be the cute one. I don't want him to upstage me. Really, it's like permission. It's an abdication. I think. Here's Stephan Kesting's take on dad bod.
Yeah.
It's a permission for women who
tread lightly, Stephan.
Women who are happy with a guy who's got dad bod.
Yeah.
Want permission. Want to be able to abdicate any responsibility for their own physical condition.
Couldn't agree more.
So there.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This video is going to get flamed and it's going to be
all
your fault.
And my small circle of detractors is going to have more evidence of what a colossal asshole I am that they can present to their 5 students to tell them why not to go to my club.
Okay, well, perfect. I'm glad it's not win-win for us, but it's win-win.
Someone's winning.
Yeah, there are people winning in this conversation. All right, Rob. So tell me about your jiu-jitsu. Honestly, okay. You have an unusual path to your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So, where did you start?
Well,
you started with Navy SEALs.
I started with Navy SEALs, reputed Navy SEALs, and then I started. Actually, my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor was Omar Salvosa, who was a brown belt at the time, and I would do private classes with him, and I trained at a couple of different places. I was training pretty much for MMA. And self-defense and stuff like that. So I was pretty much exclusively training in no-gi. And in, I think, 2004, I made a trip down to Florida. A friend of mine at the time who, again, I've been exceedingly fortunate in, we talk about the book Outliers, where people kind of stumble into circumstance that sets them on a path to achieving something. And so really I was fortunate enough to stumble ass backwards into friendships with people who happen to support my desire to live a unusual lifestyle that didn't involve a 9-to-5 job, and try to get good at jiu-jitsu.
I'm glad you qualified what unusual lifestyle meant, because I could have gone in an entirely different direction.
So like I said, I've been fortunate to not have to have a real job and be able to pursue the study of jiu-jitsu and martial arts in general. And part of that is, again, generosity from my family, my mom and my deceased father, through whom I came across some money, and between that and a little bit of lucky investing and working as a bouncer and teaching, like the first martial art that I took was called Combative Jiu-Jitsu, and I was able to teach classes in that a little bit to support myself. So I've never had to have a real job. And this friend of mine happened to relocate, who I was living with in Toronto. He happened to relocate to Florida, and he invited me down. Hey, come down. You think that jiu-jitsu is good where you're at now. You got to see it down here.
Where was he training?
He was, at the time, he was training with a guy named Josh Manzo, who was a brown belt under Pablo Popovich.
Okay.
And so I went down there and I trained with Josh, and again, it was another level. And, yeah, not like a crazy another level, but just at the time, in the early 2000s, there weren't a lot of high-level guys in Canada. And particularly for me, because I was always a guy who tried to do things differently. The idea of just going and training in the Ghee at a regular Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school wasn't something that I was looking for. I was much more interested in training no Ghee, and that didn't, there weren't no Ghee schools. So like I would do private classes with Omar where we would just train no Ghee, and then I would go to his club on open mat days and roll with everybody. And so I started going down to Florida, and on my second trip to Florida, I was fortunate enough to meet Charles McCarthy, who would become my coach. And I trained with Charles not long after being, again, fortunate enough to have an opportunity to do several hours of private training with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. And upon meeting Charles, I learned more from him. He was a purple belt at the time under Laborio. And he taught me more in half an hour than this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion did in several hours. And that's not to diminish this champion. It's just language barrier, lack of understanding of pedagogy. These are all things that I think are, and it led to my stance or position on developing jiu-jitsu athletes or students is, a high-level athlete, a high-level champion might be incredible at what he does, but doesn't have the ability to convey information.
Sure. How good a boxing instructor would Mike Tyson be?
Would Mike Tyson be, exactly. So meeting Charles, and one of the reasons it was so propitious that I met Charles is that at the time I had heavily developed my leg lock game, and I was absolutely rubbish at everything else. I couldn't pass the guard to save my life. I had no guard retention skills. I didn't have anything that would resemble what I would now characterize as real grappling skill. What I had is a bunch of wacky submissions from weird places that a lot of guys hadn't seen. And so I could, at the time, legitimately walk into most Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu clubs I would go to, and I could still tap out, instructors, purple belts, brown belts, even black belts, with heel hooks, with like weird kimuras from odd places. And I mean, these guys would run the table on me otherwise. They would pass my guard, they would mount me, they would do whatever, but it was no Ghee, and I was young and athletic and quick, and I was hard to put away, and a guy would dominate me for 10 minutes, and then I would catch him in a heel hook and be like, I'm a pretty awesome grappler. I don't really need to learn this stuff that you guys are doing where you pass the guard. Gay, as a young guy. I just did not have the foresight or the wisdom to recognize the flaws in my process. And meeting Charles was a boon because he was the leg lock guy, and so I would try all my leg lock stuff. I mean, that's nice. Pass, armbar. And so I was forced to face the limitations of my game, which if I hadn't met him, I could have spent 2, 3, 4 more years just rolling with guys and heel hooking them and thinking that made me some kind of savant, which it probably would have. The idiot part, and which is why I encourage my students so much. Like I teach leg locks. I teach right now we're doing a heel hook module at my school, but I'm always telling the guys, like, if you think you're going to build a game off of this, dude, it's the same as building a game off of absolutely not understanding leg locks.
No.
You're going to run into a guy who can defend leg locks, and then he's going to beat the crap out of you with everything else. So that was a really fortunate thing, and then over time I was able to start spending more and more time visiting, and then right around, I think it's 2009, I started really focusing on training in the Ghee. And
so all this time you've been focusing no Ghee?
Focusing no Ghee, yeah, and then...
so why on earth would you switch to the Ghee?
Well, 2 reasons. One is I did want to become, like, not just a guy who taught a few classes out of his basement so that he wouldn't have to have a real job, but I wanted to be a legitimate instructor. And the way that Charles and a couple other people put it, like, how are you going to advertise yourself as a guy who's pretty good at no Ghee? Like, what is your credential going to be? Like, are you going to be
Black
like
shirt.
Yeah, black shirt. Like, so I was like, well, I mean, I guess I could go to Eddie Bravo and cut him a check, but then I'll have to do the lotus position, which is the only way that you can prove that you can be a black belt. And I can't quite do it. So I guess that was out. I have a little old injury here that prevents me from being able to stretch my hip out quite all the way. So
That's a weakness of character.
Totally. So the process was, you got to get your black belt in jiu-jitsu, and if you want to get your black belt in jiu-jitsu, you got to start training in the Ghee. So it was something that I did kind of begrudgingly, to be honest, because I had spent a few years, drinking the Eddie Bravo Kool-Aid about the uselessness of the Ghee, and that was kind of a blind alley. And so when I started training in the Ghee, I did notice the benefits of it for certain things, although I'm still not one of those, because I don't, any more than I agree with someone like Eddie Bravo who says, no, Ghee is useless. I don't agree with the guys who are like, oh, Ghee is like, that's the only way to go. No Ghee is less technical, it's this, it's that. The claim that's often made is that it's very easy to transition from Ghee to no Ghee. It's really hard to transition from no Ghee to Ghee. I didn't find that to be the case.
Really?
Yeah, I
even
found
being a leg lock guy, which is
being a leg lock guy and being a no Ghee guy. The reason I believe it's difficult for most people to transition from no Ghee to Ghee is you're having to learn a whole bunch of new techniques, and the process of learning jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, tends to be presented to you as a process of, you're going to learn techniques. Here's week one, you're going to learn how to do an armbar from the guard, and you're going to learn how to do a triangle from the guard, and you're going to learn how to do an upa escape. You're going to learn all these techniques, and then eventually when you get enough techniques, here's your blue belt, and then you're going to learn some purple belt techniques. And oh, by the way, most of those moves we taught you at white belt, those don't really work so great. You got to learn these new ones that now they work against blue belts. And now you got some more techniques, here's your purple belt. And oh, by the way, these techniques that really work at blue belt, they don't work so well anymore. Here's some techniques, and that was kind of the process. So because you're faced with this daunting prospect now of, oh man, I got to learn like 1,000 Ghee chokes, and I got to learn this, and I got to learn that. It's impossible. It's too much material right off the bat, and because you've learned a bunch of no Ghee techniques that depend on gripping here instead of gripping here. Now you're like, man, these techniques that I know, they don't work. I gotta learn all these new techniques, I don't know what to do. And I didn't really have that approach. I was fortunate enough around the time that I started focusing on the Ghee, both to see my coach narrowing down his process. He had gone through this.
This was Charles McCarthy.
Charles, yeah, he had gone through this process of reducing the amount of techniques that he employed, whether it was in the Ghee or no Ghee. He basically said, like, anything that takes me any unnecessary effort, I'm trying to get rid of it. And so seeing him go through that and just start...
Can you give an example? Like, what did he...
Well, at a certain point, he just stopped going for arm triangles.
Okay.
He's like, I just find it's too... doesn't quite work. He even reduced the amount. He was a Kimura specialist even. And he started even going for that a little bit less. And just in general, anything that he found that he felt was too much effort, he's like, I'm getting rid of that from my game. I'm getting rid of that from my game. At the same time, I was being exposed to Ryan Hall's instructional material and his way of conveying jiu-jitsu as being a set of principles.
Yeah, it's very conceptual.
Very conceptual, and it spoke to the way that my mind works. Everything I'd always done while I was learning, I would try to understand through a conceptual lens. I just didn't have the framework for it at the time. So as much as I might be a physics nerd or a science nerd, and I would try to categorize things, I wasn't using the right categories, and this led me towards the right categories. So when I made the transition from training mostly Ghee to training mostly no Ghee to training mostly Ghee, I just tried to systematize everything. And that led to, one, ignoring blind alleys, although there were still a few, but mostly being able to ignore blind alleys and focus largely on the body mechanics of what I was doing. And just understanding points of control rather than this is technique 570 of how to wrap someone's lapel around them. I just have to create rotational control. I have to create lever-based control. I have to use either direct control or proxy control. All these terms that I've since tried to, basically create a system out of. And when I say a system, I wouldn't characterize what I teach as a system of jiu-jitsu in the same way that people will say, oh, this is 10th planet jiu-jitsu and this is whatever, Atos Jiu-Jitsu, because it's constantly changing. I've tried to, at my academy, basically rip off the best guys in the world. What do the best guys at each particular skill that I happen to be teaching, what do they do?
Can you give some concrete examples? Like just the guys who...
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you recently did a podcast with Bernardo Faria. So he is pretty much the best guy, or if not the best, maybe between him and Murillo Santana, as the best over-under passers in the game. So
it's hard to deny that these past, won a world championship.
Exactly. And then, if you're looking for the De La Riva guard, you're looking at the Mendes brothers. If you're looking for the inverted guard, you're looking at Ryan Hall or the 50-50 guard. If you're looking for butterfly guard, you're looking for Marcelo Garcia. So any particular skill or specialty, I would try to just study the crap out of it, learn how they do it, train with them if I could. I was fortunate enough to spend a little bit of time training with Marcelo, a little bit of time training with Ryan Hall. I've recently been able to train with Kai Otera. I'm heading back there again. I've tried to seek out the best guys and get a chance to, again, either study their instructional material or study with them personally and create a system, not, again, a system of jiu-jitsu techniques, but a system for learning jiu-jitsu and a system of fundamental movements that comprise jiu-jitsu. So once you understand the fundamental movements, you can create a personal expression of jiu-jitsu that suits your body type, that suits your personality.
So once you understand the laws of physics and civil engineering, you can build any kind of
you
structure.
You can build anything you want, exactly.
And it won't fall down, hopefully.
No, and I mean, there's an interview out there with John Danaher, who's another sort of personal, I guess, hero of mine as far as instruction goes, where he says he's a dictator on the basics. And I would characterize myself the same way. When I teach, if your foot is a little bit wrong for base, I'm gonna yell at you. Not yell at you like you're a piece of shit, but like, hey man, you the guy who shows up once every 2 weeks, I don't care, you do it right. So I try to make sure that people do the fundamental movements that create proper body alignment correctly. And then after that, you want to be a deep half guy, be a deep half guy. You want to be a De La Riva guy, go nuts. If you want to go for flying submissions, go nuts. But if you're the guy who's winning every blue belt tournament with flying submissions,
good luck doing that at purple, brown, black.
Yeah, you could. A lot of those guys, are the guy. And I mean, and I know I'm going off on a different tangent, but any guy who is basically a professional jiu-jitsu competitor at purple belt is going to be able to do flying triangles on some guys, and that guy might just be awesome. But there's also the guys that are pulling off, wacky, or being the only guy who's good at footlocks in a small geographic region and showing up to local tournaments and footlocking rubes. It doesn't make you good at jiu-jitsu. It means that as long as you stay in your small pond, you're never going to go beyond that. But that's
a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah, that's a separate tangent. But so because I was able to create concrete systems for developing these movements, I feel like I was able to make the transition to Ghee relatively easily. And for instance, something I don't know whether I should admit, my first time competing in the Ghee was at black belt. And I was fortunate to be able to win gold in my first tournament.
How long did it take you once you started training with the Ghee to make it to black belt?
Well, depending on how you want to define it.
Seriously, once you seriously started training.
I'd say about 2 years, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't the first time you put on the Ghee?
No, but it was the first time I really devoted myself to,
I
went from purple to brown to black very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been doing a bit of training with you, and it's, to watch how you deconstruct the basic, I want to say basic, fundamental is so much a better word.
Yeah.
Fundamental principles of movement, and then okay, well, here's the principle, and now let's apply it 100 different ways or 10 different ways.
Yeah.
To stop somebody from passing your guard, right? If he's at this range, here are your options. And if he's at this range, here are your other set of options. I found that really useful. It provides a context to then take a look at what all these. I mean, there are always the freaks out there, right? The meows who are so flexible that put both their feet behind their.
Well, we were talking about that earlier. I think there is something that
they're attribute-based games.
Yeah, that's exactly what we call it, an attribute-based game, and that's something that I think people who don't think deeply about jiu-jitsu aren't offered the opportunity to view it through this lens. Like, why is that guy really good? Why can't I just do what he does? Well, for one, are you an autistic kid who trains 8 hours a day? Well, there's your answer why you can't do what he does. 2, do you have the physical capability of putting both your legs behind your head? If you can't, then you can't do what he does. And I think it's important for those of us who are like, I'm not
having a guard where both your legs have to go behind your own head is great.
Yeah.
You can do that, but it's like having a mount escape system based on being able to
bench
press
that's
400 pounds.
That's absolutely right, and I think that
great for the guys who can do it.
Right. So for somebody who as an instructor, at some point you have to choose, or pick your battles or choose what you're going to focus on. And I think what I've tried to focus on as a coach is creating a system for the more average person to be able to achieve or mirror the sort of skills that a high-level practitioner achieves with, whereas a high-level practitioner, a world champion and an elite-level competitor might achieve these skills just by default. If you put 10 years into getting good at something, there's certain things you're going to pick up along the way, there's certain things you're going to develop along the way.
You're getting your 10,000 hours.
You're going to get your 10,000 hours in, and you're going to be an expert at so many things that some of them are going to be the crucial things. And I think that what I've stumbled upon and tried to develop, again, largely, it's that old saying, if I see far, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. So by taking ideas from Ryan Hall, by taking ideas from John Danaher or Damien Meyer, from my coach Charles McCarthy, from trying to model what the best thinkers, the best practitioners are doing, and trying to distill it into, again, an underlying system for what are the movements, what are the physical principles that you should be following. I think I've done a good job of creating a system where a more average person can, let's say, speed up the process.
Mm-hmm.
By how much, I don't know, but again, like I said before, I've had quite a few students be very successful in competition. I've had students that have won pans at purple belt.
Just today.
Yeah, there you go.
We were at a tournament earlier, and that's what we're doing this interview on the tail end of. And
I had a couple of students win gold in very impressive fashion. My purple belt, he won gold with 3 matches ending by submission.
Yeah, there was nobody that didn't submit.
Yeah, so I've got a system, and that system works very well for athletes as well. Like if you're an athlete and you're not having to put 10,000 hours in and go down blind alleys, and that's why my purple belt Shane is so good, is because this is a guy who is a high level athlete, has achieved success in other fields like swimming and hockey and things like that. And so when you take somebody like that and he has the analytical approach to learning and the willingness to follow the formula, because the formula that I use is different. It's not what you're used to. My classes are different, my seminars are different, the way that I teach is a little bit different. And I know, for example, I've got an affiliate club in Ontario, and the guy who runs it there, he has asked me in the past, he's like, how do you get your students to do the amount of drilling or do the kind of stuff that you espouse? And I'm like, what do you mean, how? I tell them to do it and they do it. Again, because they follow a certain formula, they're able to achieve quicker results. And again, going back to my affiliate club in Ontario, the guy who runs it just came down here, and I put down a bunch of material for him on video of our modules and what to follow. And 2-3 weeks later, he sends me an email. He's like, I got a student here that's gotten better at guard retention in the last 2 weeks since we started working on this material than he got in the last 2 years training at a major, very well-known, high-level competition school and at my club for the past 6 months. And it's not that I'm showing, he's like, it was not a single movement that he didn't already know. It was just the system.
No.
It's understanding the principle and knowing when to do it.
I'm not saying that high-level guys can't benefit from your material, because they probably can. But I think they're already high-level for a reason.
Exactly.
So it's almost like accelerating people through that white, blue, low purple stage.
Absolutely.
You can learn it the easy way, or you can learn it the hard way.
Yeah. Well, like I have a student, for instance, we have a visiting student program at our club, and the visiting student program is one of the ways that I try to pay forward the ridiculous amount of generosity that my life has that I've received in my life, that I've benefited from. Like I said, whether it's friends, whether it's coaches, whether it's above all else, my mom, Barbara, hey mom, who is responsible more than any other person for my success in life, because of her generosity, because of her support, and because of her willingness to understand that, her son might be good as a lawyer or a doctor, because he certainly can yammer away at crap, but that's not.
I can't see it.
Yeah, but that's not what he wants out of life. And if he can fill a niche that helps other people with something that I completely don't understand, you know, I mean, I don't think she saw me do jiu-jitsu for many years and was still willing to support me doing it. And so anyway, I try to pay that forward with this visiting student program, where anybody from anywhere who wants to come and train with us, come and visit for a week or two, is welcome to do so for free. You know, I have a spare room in my place. I got it for the express reason of hosting people who come through town. So I've had visiting students come from Eastern Canada. We've had guys come up from the States, and they, you know, again, follow this formula and find that it's uniquely successful for them. And these are guys who have had opportunities to train at other clubs, again, very high-level clubs, and what they find is, yeah, the guys at those high-level competitor clubs that are coming in and putting in, you know, the 4 hours a day and all that, those guys get really good. But if you're not one of the chosen competitors, or if you're not the guy who's putting in all these hours to gain all these skills, then your road is harder.
Yeah.
And
well, certainly there are. I mean, a lot of clubs, they really just cherry pick the guys who are most likely to medal.
Yeah.
And somehow the instructor's ego is completely tied up with how many medals their guys produce, and especially the Brazilians, the team trophy is
a big thing.
Is a big thing, and you know, it's worth, you know, fist fights and arguments and.
Well, and you know, I mean, I can't say that I'm above that. I know one of my proudest achievements as a coach has been the couple of times where we've sent a skeleton crew to a tournament and ended up, you know, top 3, 4 in the team trophy. You know, we did a tournament in Seattle a couple of years ago, the Washington State Grappling Championships, and we were the smallest team there, and we placed top 3 in Ghee and no Ghee, and we were the only club to be in the top 3 in both Ghee and no Ghee. And that was, you know, an achievement for me, and I think it spoke to the results that we created as an academy. As a young academy, we'd only been a club for less than a year at the time. So I'm proud of things like that, but you know, if you win a team trophy because you've got 8 jillion competitors, that's not the same as, you know, to me, if you're going to give out a team trophy.
That's Mr. Bean being excited about a Christmas card arriving when he's put the Christmas card through the door to himself.
So if you don't stuff the ballot, if you decide the team trophy based on, you know, the ratio of competitors relative to the size of your school that medals, that would be a far more just way of doing it. But
then people would just
cherry pick and then send their 5 best killers. So
which is what used to happen back in the old days in Brazil. I remember Marcos Suarez, my main Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, talking about yes, there were the big competitions, but the fiercest competitions were in the academy
for the spots.
For the spots, because they could only send so many guys.
Yeah.
So there'd be guys like ripping each other's heads off to get those spots.
I've heard of this, you know, with like the A team for certain competition teams because they get a favorable draw and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, that's stuff that I try to really stay away from. Like I said, I am proud of the fact that as a small club, we have been able to show up to tournaments and be in the top 5 while having the smallest amount of competitors. But like really, I think that competition is not. For one, it's not what we focus on. That's something that I think some people, especially in our community, one of the criticism that's leveled on me by certain, let's say, instructors on the island is that, oh, they're a hardcore competition club. No, we're not. It's ridiculous. We show up and we goof around and we try to get good at jiu-jitsu by playing games. We don't focus on competition at all. We're not a competition club. I don't have guys coming in like, all right, guys, here's how you're going to get 2 points, and we're going to guard pull, and we're going to use this strategy. I just teach my students to get good at jiu-jitsu. We very much follow the idea that I believe Faraz Zahabi of TriStar has this term called universal jiu-jitsu, which is your jiu-jitsu should work in MMA, it should work in Ghee, it should work in no Ghee, it should work for self-defense. If that's not true, then you're not really doing jiu-jitsu, you're doing an expression of a rule set of jiu-jitsu, and I don't believe that at all. I think we've had students succeed at Ghee, succeed at no Ghee, and for instance, we've had students succeed very well at no Ghee, despite the fact that for large periods of time, we train only Ghee. We've had, you watched the tournament today. For the last month, Shane and myself have been training exclusively no Ghee. He put on a Ghee once before doing this tournament. And if you understand jiu-jitsu on a fundamental principle level, it shouldn't matter. So we're not a hardcore competition club. We're just guys who try to get good at jiu-jitsu. And I think that's, again, the results speak for themselves, whether it's the guys who never compete and, people come in and visit our club from from wherever. Like, wow, man, all your guys are killers. Like, oh, I mean, we focus on getting good at jiu-jitsu. They should be good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the. It's nice that it's quantifiable, right? Like you can do, imaginary, what was it, live action role play?
LARPing, yeah.
LARPing for a long, long time, and think that you're pretty damn good at the five-finger exploding hard palm technique.
There we go.
But in jiu-jitsu, it's fairly quantifiable. Like you can armbar this guy, or he can armbar you, or you can pass this guy and dominate him positionally, or he can pass your guard and dominate you positionally, and it's very quantifiable.
It's very quantifiable, and
you drop out for a month, you get injured for a while, you come back, and you're getting murdered. It's not,
And that's why, I think Saulo Ribeiro has this saying, which is jiu-jitsu is made for you to quit. And it's true. It is, because like
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, he says it's jiu-jitsu or it's designed for you to quit. Because like you said, you take a month off, you come back, oh man, these guys are way better than me. Well, I guess it's time for me to stop going. Yeah, there's a saying, I think, which is, in life you can find a reason to do something, you can find reasons not to do something. And how much success you have is going to be decided by which one of those paths you choose to take. Do I always decide not to do something, or do I find reasons to do it? And jiu-jitsu will constantly challenge you to do that. It'll challenge you to give up because a guy you thought you were better than beat you, or it'll challenge you to give up because you're a 200-pound man and a 140-pound woman beat you, and all that kind of personalization stuff. And I know we talked a little bit about ego, and one of the things I really try to convey to my students is you don't win, you don't lose. Jiu-jitsu always wins. The person who expresses jiu-jitsu more purely, more technically, is just channeling jiu-jitsu in the better way. So it was the technique, it was the approach that won. If you want the approach to win, be the person who shows up and is able to express the technique more correctly, and then you can temporarily, cling to that victory inside the club, which again, who cares? But yeah, I think there definitely is that aspect of quantifiability. But the flip side of that is I think sometimes we can be, and I hope you don't mind if I go on another tangent here, but we can be victims.
Tangents are us.
Yeah, we can be victims to the idea of testability and saying, well, okay, I couldn't armbar that guy, therefore the armbar doesn't work.
Right.
Okay, well, are you a 140-pound guy, and is that guy a 220-pound steroid guy? You couldn't armbar. No kidding. He can bicep curl your entire body weight. Yeah. And that's why it goes back to separating attributes from the pure technique of jiu-jitsu and really trying to learn jiu-jitsu for the sake of expressing proper technique and not winning.
And maybe it wasn't your day, and maybe it was his day, or maybe you got lucky.
Mental slip, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's such an elusive art.
It is, and I just think
made for you to quit. That's when you say.
Yeah, and I just think it's important because sometimes people, I'll remark on a technique and say that's not a very good technique. Well, I saw so and so do that in so and so tournament. Like, well, yeah, I mean, you also see, you can see Rafa Mendes show up at a local tournament in Tokyo every year because his sponsors send him there and dance around hobbyist black belts and do crazy techniques. Like, look, Rafa Mendes did that. I'm going to work on that flying reverse lapel choke this week. Man, come on. That's not legit. That's somebody, that's Michael Jordan coming in and playing a pickup basketball game with guys who play on the weekends.
Yes,
he can do whatever he wants to them. That doesn't make it a valid way to play the game.
Or again, to take the piss out on urban combatives. Oh, I saw this work once. Well, anything can work on a drunk.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, well, you can knock a drunk out with a slap. You can knock a drunk out with a punch. You can knock a drunk out with your ox hand.
Well, and this is one of my favorite things about the current schism in jiu-jitsu between sport jiu-jitsu and self-defense jiu-jitsu. God. This whole idea that a guy who is able to berimbolo somebody at the purple belt level at a tournament is not going to be able to handle some drunk. We got to work on headlock defense. Come on, before I knew anything about jiu-jitsu, I had taken on 4 people in a bar fight and choked them all out because I knew an arm drag and a rear naked choke. And I always say, if you know an arm drag and a rear naked choke, that is 95% of what you need to know for self-defense. You don't need to know headlock defense. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn it, obviously, but this idea that up until you get your blue belt, you got to be working on haymakers and headlock defense, you're going to become a crappy grappler. And anybody with any grappling skill whatsoever, anyone who can do a double leg and an arm drag and any basic grappling technique is more than equipped to perform well in a self-defense scenario.
Yeah. And again, I would argue that the technique is a secondary thing. The primary thing is that
The skill in controlling a human body and the stress response. Yeah.
Which is really the single best argument for competition as a self-defense training thing, because the adrenaline rush of being there in front of your peers and your instructor and hundreds of spectators.
I couldn't agree more, and it's amazing to me that the self-defense...
So even if your game plan is to pull inverted guard, doesn't matter, because you're pulling inverted guard
under stress.
Yeah.
Well, and that's amazing to me that the guys who will, promote this urban combative style, and they say, well, you practice under this rule set, and you train under this rule set, and therefore in a street fight it's in a different rule set, and you're not going to be used to it. Well, what do you train under? You train under Fantasyland rules, where we're not actually resisting. So the fact that you practice eye gouging doesn't matter, because you're not practicing under real stress. So there's a lot of deeply flawed logic out there in both the urban, but even in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community.
I think it was John Danaher's point, but I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. But it's 100% true that Jigoro Kano's genius, the founder of judo, they had all these systems of Japanese jiu-jitsu, which were sort of the urban combatives of their day, like neck break followed by sucking the guy's eyeball out and then biting off the optical nerve, or whatever, like punching to the 12th spleen meridian. He took out all the deadliest techniques.
The deadliest, yeah.
Well, no, they are deadly.
Yeah, no,
you can make an objective argument that the eye gouge is a deadlier technique than the armbar. But if you and I are training the eye gouge at full force, after we turn the camera off, we're gonna eye gouge at full force. I'm really gonna be trying to eye gouge you. You're really gonna be trying to eye gouge me. It's gonna be a short training session.
And we're never going to train again.
Yeah. Or maybe one of us will. Yeah. But really, the odds of,
The more proficient gouger will eventually become the Miyamoto Musashi of eye gouging.
But as a sustainable training method, so Kano's essential genius was saying, better that we get really good at applying the, quote, less deadly techniques, the throws where you're not dropping the guy directly on top of his head. Well, they go to a judo tournament, you see lots of guys getting thrown directly on top of their head.
Yep.
Not that notwithstanding. That you're producing a much more effective grappler, martial artist by training the less deadly techniques than you would by practicing the more deadly techniques in Fantasyland.
Oh, well, absolutely, and I think, genius is a good word for it, but when you sit down and just think about what you've just said, there could be no other way. There's no way that you could get so good at eye gouging. There's just no way that you could get so good at eye gouging that it could become a replicable skill under the stress of combat. You just can't. So anything that is a replicable...
If you had a lot of convicts.
If you had a room... in modern society, or in anything resembling a modern just society, there's
Not that I've thought about this. Not that I'm going to admit to having thought about this.
That's where that door leads. I was wondering...
Need a place to stack the bodies.
So in any... conceivable modern circumstance, there is no way that you could get so good at these purportedly deadly skills that you could become proficient at it for replicability in combat under stress.
Yeah. And if you're efficient at applying semi-deadly techniques in combat under stress or fake combat, then there's a chance that you're actually going to retain enough of your executive function to go, oh yeah, I could also eye gouge. Whereas if you're your fine motor skill is going to be shot to hell. I bet you that if you told Rafa Mendes, okay, listen, at the end of this match, I want you to eye gouge this guy. He'd be able to do it.
No problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. High level skill in any combative sport is just so, again, the average person just doesn't understand, I think, what the levels of ability are. Again, I mentioned earlier, the average guy walks into a gym, and let's say there's a blue belt who's a fraud and he's wearing a black belt. As the average guy on the street, there's no way you could tell. You would not be able to tell. Any remotely legit blue belt should be able to do whatever he wants to you. So to you, wow, if someone's better than that guy, yeah, not only is someone better than that guy,
they're 10 times.
They're 10 times better than that guy. And the guy that's 10 times, 20 times better than that guy, there's another guy who is 10 or 20 times better than that guy. And people don't realize just how deeply it scales up.
It's too depressing to think about. I'm just going to go back to eye gouging. All right, I'm gonna go rebuild my eye gouging dummy that I thought about building as a child.
And I'm gonna go learn some more words.
All right. Thanks a lot, Rob.
No, it's my pleasure.
Great chat.
Thank you.